Hello and welcome. It's David and Brent again. May the 15th. May is seems like it's just getting started, but it's actually half over. And so I hope planting and the spring season is going well for all of you. So Brent, big big report this week. Kind of I always see this May WASDE report as a transition. So we shifted gears. We now have the 2020 2021 balance sheet coming into play, starting to think about production and the growing season. So what was your quick take from the WASDE report this week?
Well, the WASDE, I thought, gave us pretty much what we have expected. It would give us a huge corn number to start with. And so, I don't think there are any big surprises there other than the fact that, when you get right down to it, the corn, I think we're having a hard time, all of us, getting our head around just how much extra corn we're going to have. And, you and I were talking ahead of this. When you dig into the interesting thing is on the demand side, if you look at the different components, we'll be writing some articles about this. They were probably pretty optimistic on the demand side. You could easily see that stocks number go way bigger than it is now, especially with a good crop. So, not good news for corn, I don't think, in any way. I mean, in fact, it wasn't. It didn't take the market down a bunch because it's kind of already priced in, but it's just kind of reality check of, it's not going to be good.
Yeah. So real quick on the corn to give you a preview, ethanol is down over the last 2 years. Exports are down for the last couple of years. The only number that's up is feed and residual, and so that's a big question mark. We got to see how that plays out. And the animal side of agriculture hasn't been immune to the impacts of COVID. So we got to see how that plays out. A couple of numbers that I was looking at, that price point that they put down for an early, again, this is for the 2020-2021 marketing year. So we're going to be marketing this crop all the way into the fall of next year, 15 months from now. So they put some price points as a starting point: $8.20 for soybeans, $3.20 for corn. Brent, you shared an article last year that showed outside of a big 2012 like production hiccup, these numbers are actually pretty good. And so we'll add a link, or these numbers can tell us a lot. They're not good or bad. They're not favorable for corn producers or growers right now, but they can tell us a lot.
Right. I think the whole genesis of that article, I think it was last year, was to say, okay, well, if you want a price forecast, what can you use? You use the futures market today or whatever, but it changes so much. How good are those USDA market year average forecasts? And what we found when we look back on it is they're actually not that bad. They're going to miss it, obviously, in the year where, like 2012, where we had a drought. They missed it because they overestimated supply, and so they had a lower price. And but their long run track record is actually not that bad. So if nothing much changes from the current status, 320 is probably a pretty realistic number for that, and that's not good news for anybody.
Yeah, I think it's a good way of summarizing it. It's a good status quo look ahead, and it's going to take a big disruption to move the needle on that. So on the other side of this, we're going to have an article out later today, probably up all by the time you get there. We have a new question in the Forecast Network. It's $40 billion or bust for government payments here in the 2020 year. Inflation adjusted. So I guess let me back up. Britt and I were debating this a couple months ago. Will we get to 30 billion? For context, we were about 24, 25 billion last year, and that was a big number. We get to 30 billion. One of us was thinking probably, the other one of us was saying no way. And then, we started working on this post and we're like, oh, 30 billion's, almost in the bag right now. Now it's 35 billion. And so we raised it to 40 billion. The question's at 40 billion. There's a lot of it's a pretty technical post, a lot of stuff to wade through there. But 30 billion seems like it's there. Another round of funding would potentially get us there. For a reference point, 35 billion in inflation adjusted dollars would be a record. I mean, this is going back through the late 90s, early 2000s, and even back in the 1980s. Probably won't get to a record with payments as a share of total farm income. We were very reliant on direct payments for almost 60+% of our total income back in the 1980s. But these are going to capture some headlines. These are going to be, I think it's going to be a tricky optics for the ag sector to wade through. But I think on one hand, they're going to be necessary, especially in light of the prices we talked about. But on the other hand, it's going to be a lot of big numbers. It's hard to believe. We were talking about, will we get another round of MFP money just 3 or 4 months ago? And this is really MFP to a whole nother level, a whole nother threshold. One of them is going to be $9 billion just earmarked for livestock producers. And so the pie is going to be bigger, a lot more slices. Brent, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think without big government payments, it's going to be absolute train wreck in farm country. There's just no way around it. And as you point out, the challenge now is that there's a lot. I mean, we're going to have payments to a lot of groups that probably hadn't gotten them in the past. And so some of those groups are really big, livestock, cattle in particular. So how are we going to split all that up and make it enough? I mean, it is going to have to be a big number to move the needle. And it just looks like not a lot of good news anywhere you can turn.
A couple other articles to point out. Background article on that Defense Production Act that was used to open up the meatpacking industry. If we heard a lot about DPA, and so Sarah did a great job of looking back at to what really that was. I learned a lot. It's been used quite a bit in history, but never used for national health. And I guess my takeaway from reading this is that, if someone wanted to sue and take it to the Supreme Court, it's not clear that this DPA could be used in this meatpacking industry. I don't think anyone's going to take it there, but it's sort of one of those situations where you stop back and you look at the details. You learn a lot, and you're like, this is a pretty interesting move. Not sure how it would play out in a court of law, but this is how we're going to use it for the time being. Also, Brett and I are wrapping up an article on 6 lessons that we learned over the last 6 years, actually, of writing blog posts. I had a lot of fun thinking about that. One of the things we spent a lot of time on was social media, and we talked about how we've fallen into the social media traps, especially when it comes to yields. It seems like you can always find a picture of a lot of pictures of bad crops every single year. How many of those pictures do you need before you can actually say something about the national crop? Probably a lot. We all learn as farm kids, you can't take the conditions in your backyard or in your county and extrapolate that to the whole growing season. And our minds just aren't really good at processing an endless feed of content through Twitter. And so I think it's worth always keeping that in the back of your mind. Brent, anything else you're looking at for the next week or thinking about?
No, I think that's it. Trying to finish up planning on our farm and get things moving forward. So
make sure you update your forecast on the gasoline consumption. That data's moved a lot. It's starting to have a V shape to the uptick. I changed my forecast quite a bit on the idea of us getting to 9 million barrels per day by the end of the summer. I think we're going to be there a little bit quicker than that. So maybe that's a positive story here in the middle of
Yeah, I guess the thing has been on my mind a lot has been this just kind of unemployment story, 30-some million unemployment claims so far. It's mind-blowing, actually, when you think about it. and the overall damage to the economy is, Jay Powell was out this week. That was the other big news with his kind of pretty negative view, I guess, and I think it's pretty realistic. This is going to be a huge hole to climb out of nationally. I'm not sure we've fully got our heads around how tough it's going to be to kind of get the economy rolling again.
Yeah, it's one thing we talked about in preparing, right, is the number of people filing for unemployment still going up, right? There's still more people filing. The rate is decreasing, so fewer people each week, but still a big number. The total unemployment's going up. But PPP, when's this PPP money going to kick in, right? So we're at least in a lot of cases a month into this PPP program, and have we started to see the impacts of that? And so I think that's a good point. We had a lot of questions, a lot of unknowns about the economy, and we're still trying to see how things are going to move forward. I think we got to start to see some movement here in the next month. If we're going to start to see, I guess if we're still treading water like we are today, a month from now, it's going to be a pretty bleak outlook, and you're going to see even more concern in the markets.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Well, on that optimistic note, we'll wrap it up for this week. Thanks for joining us. Update your forecast. We'll be back next week. Take care.
See ya.
Oh.